Welcome, friends. Today I had the honor of speaking to Scott Wallner again. Scott's been on the channel many different times. If you do not know him, I do recommend listening to the very first episode I did with him. I'll link it down below, in which he tells me about his story. He's got a beautiful story of pursuing an athletic career in football or soccer for the Americans out there. And when he had a devastating injury, he put all of that energy into learning, reading, academics, try to make it in that. And then more recently, he started a family, he got married. And I think Scott and I have a lot in common. We have a similar hunger for life, I guess. And I always love exploring different topics with him. Today I wanted to talk to the strange, talk about the strange with him rather. The strange is something that has been pulling me lately, not in a bad way, simply that I feel that my life needs more dynamic energy. I'm looking for more adventure at the moment. I feel that my thoughts have been stagnating a little bit. And if you feel similarly, listen to this conversation as I try to hash this out with him and try to get to deeper insights and try to further along my thinking and go on the adventure that truth is. So please enjoy this episode, and I will link our past episodes down below. Thank you. Woo. Welcome back to the channel, friends. I'm joined by Scott Wallner. Scott, how are you doing?
We're good. We're
Good.
good. Yeah, you put me in a good mood just by having our little pre-start conversation, and we just got to jump right in. So,
Yeah, we discussed a bit beforehand, but we realized we should just start recording because it's otherwise we're gonna end up repeating so much. But yeah,
sure.
I wanted to discuss the strange with Scott today. I spoke to Emily a couple of weeks ago. For those that didn't watch that, Emily's an artist. And what I really liked about that conversation specifically is that she has a different way of thinking, and it allowed new ideas to open themselves up to me and new insights to occur. So I thought of Scott because I think Scott thinks in an unorthodox manner. Um, I feel like you discover things, or at least you like to research things that for a lot of people are just, everyday experiences. Like, why would you ever think about them? But I really like that you do. So so yeah, I
Okay.
think that's cool. And I went to Scott and like I want to discuss strange things, strangeness. And I've been trying to pin that down more, but I thought this was just a good place to start, introduce a bit what I've been thinking of. And yeah, I'll let you say a bit and then let's see where we go from there.
Well, I really do want you to lead because you said earlier before we talked, you've been sort of drawn to
Yeah.
it. So I want you to sort of lead with what have you been drawn to specifically? Because I think what we found before we started is just that, like usual, I'm just going to start rambling about whatever you throw at me. And
Yeah.
so you're, sort of inspirational to whatever we can focus on. But, we did sort of discuss thinking about the sort of meta thinking of what strangeness is and like why do we feel strange about certain things. And
Yeah.
so there's the specifics of what is strange or what we recognize as strange, but then there's also just the step back like, hmm, where does that sense of strangeness come from? Uh, and why do we feel certain things are strange and certain things are not? And
Yeah.
so there's an extra layer, but I want to dive right into the specifics of what you've been drawn
Yes.
to. Um, so yeah, go for it.
Excellent. Okay, good. So, yeah, I think it's that I've been feeling that things have been a bit static in terms of my thinking space. The ideas that I've been struggling with over the last couple of months, I've just felt like I've been at a bit of a standstill. And in general, just I guess this little corner for people that are familiar with the term, um, people that are inspired by the likes of John Vervaeke and Jonathan Pajot and stuff like that, Jordan Peterson. Um, I feel like the ideas have come at a bit of a standstill. A lot of people have arrived at a certain identity, perhaps, started being like happy with certain ideas, and I've stopped feeling very challenged. Like I just hear things and I'm like, yeah, I can really understand what you're saying, I don't feel threatened by what you're saying. I don't feel that anything you're saying is strange anymore. Whereas I was always drawn by these types of thinkers because like they said things and I'm like, wow, I never thought about that way. But now I think about everything that way. So that's what kind of brought me to the strange itself because I stopped recognizing it in my own life in terms of the content I consume, perhaps. Um, but the personal has always remained interesting to me. So I think that there's something there, something like there's some novelty there, perhaps not strangest, but novelty keeps popping up. But yeah, the strange because after I spoke to Emily, who's an artist, I got into touch with someone that she spoke to before, Jason, who I spoke to last week, and he's spoken to like witches and stuff like that, and like thinking about what magic is actually. Like I never even thought about those types of things. So yeah, that's a bit about the personal motivation. Mostly it's me trying to break my frame of reality again, to see what new is there to learn. So yeah,
I, wow. Wow. Um, that is a sort of aspiration that many people before us have gone through as well, right? Yeah, where does that sort of creative impetus or yearning for an extra, you know, enlightened moment or realization, to come into the picture when, yeah, the feeling of that realization you said, and I totally relate to this, where it's like, oh my gosh, I've never heard it said that way, but it makes so much sense in the way that I feel about things and the way that I think things work. And it sort of feels like almost sometimes like I've had that idea before,
yeah,
or, um, yeah, that but also extending upon what you've already maybe thought about yourself. And so that feeling is driving you to want more of that,
yeah.
right? And so yeah, I guess in a practical way, are you thinking about, okay, how do I break my frame? Like what type of practices do I go through to actually get outside of it?
Yeah, I guess so. I think I've just been also consuming different types of content. Like I've changed what I've been listening to. I've actually been listening to a lot of music and
Hmm.
um, absorbing more story. And
Okay.
so actually, I watched Lord of the Rings this week because I was sick. Like I hadn't watched it in super long, and I never really liked it. But this is the first time it seriously clicked for me. That I was like, okay, this is excellent type of stuff.
Oh,
Uh,
cool. Interesting.
but yeah, I'm actively trying on the podcast as well to speak to people like yourself, like people that really think differently than myself. Because felt like I've spoken to a lot of people that think so similarly to me that that's been difficult. Um, and so that's one of the ways in which I'm trying to open things up for myself. But yeah, um, I'm also, you know, like I had a choice this year. So I finished my studies last year, and I was very comfortable in that. Like it was quite doable. And university in general, I felt very comfortable with the medium. And now I'm on track to become a school teacher, starting at a school soon, like young kids, And that's a way in which I do that as well. Like I'm throwing myself into the strange land, strange territory, because I want to learn a lot. So, so that's another way.
Cool. Um, Teaching is a really interesting experience. And there's a lot to get out of it and a lot to offer in the experience too. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, music I think is one way to sort of shift yourself into a maybe strange way of thinking. Obviously like music and chanting and rituals and
Mhm.
things like that have been incorporated into I guess like events that are geared towards I want to say like conjuring up the strange, you
Yeah.
know, sort of just like bringing it into reality, maybe either for themselves or in a group setting. So music and certain rhythms and
But why is
things
that?
like what's that?
Why is music so good for that? What is the reason for that, if you have any idea?
I have a few ideas, but I think it's a different type of it's a different type of awareness and attention. Uh, the so much of our human experience is sort of visually driven, and we make a lot of decisions based on what we see and how we can act upon what we see. Um, I think that something like hearing might be, oh gosh, I should somebody fact check me, but I think that's like a more ancient sense in the terms of like the
Yeah,
evolutionary story. And so, yeah, something like hearing or recognition of vibration or sensation through vibration. I think it's
yeah,
just something that's really, really deep. Um, and so tapping into those deep patterns maybe just can sort of shift things from you know, a really fundamental level.
yeah,
So that's one thing. I do think it also helps you. I don't maybe there I don't know the why behind this, but music just sort of helps you escape your immediate surroundings.
yeah,
Sometimes when we hear music, we actually have the reflex to like close your eyes, right? And so I think music does aid in that sort of shutting out of all the extra stimulus and or inspiration or whatever.
yeah.
Um, so it can, yeah, sort of protect you maybe a little bit or sort of simplify your awareness.
Mm,
Uh, that's one reason music might work. I I think music can do this also, and but it's something that happens to me and puts me into what I think of as sort of like this strange thought mode, um, which is um, okay. So when I'm driving. Um, I have this sort of very limited awareness on what's happening, like especially like on a long drive, if you're like on a highway and there's not a lot of traffic or anything like that. And again, just the relaxation of all the stuff in your life being like not really that important, but just sort of the driving action is like really important.
yeah,
I'm sort of vague, not vaguely, but like very easily focused on just keep the wheel in this orientation, stay inside the lines, look around for what's going on. That sort of helps me as well. And it seems like again, it sort of just simplifies or narrows down the the awareness. And so then often like when I'm driving, I have creative thoughts and trains of thoughts that just like come up and very like in a very patterned way for me. Like when you get into a certain driving routine with your commute to work, that's when it has happened to me in the past. Um, I started to get also in the pattern of just like getting into this relaxed driving mode and then then I'm not even trying and things start coming up and then I just like go with it and
yeah.
I would just hit the record button on a little recorder and most of the time I never listened to any of them ever again. I've probably done hundreds of those.
That's crazy. And like, I feel like you have in general, I mean, you have the same with the drawings, right? Can you say a bit about that? Like you've done a whole lot of drawings. Can you say a bit about that practice that you did?
For sure. That was another thing that I thought I could talk about because it was actually my intention by well, at first setting myself up to do that practice. I never have been an artist or never really focused on that like growing up. I was so focused on athletics
Hmm.
and so I was inspired by Jung to do something like this, where I would just try to essentially free draw, and just try to again sort of relax my awareness, step away from all of the planning and problem solving, and even at that time, maybe like you, which was part of the problem solving was like the thinking and the philosophizing and like putting the pieces together. So, um, yeah, and so essentially, since I had no artistic technique or skills or really even like creative drive, I just limited myself to a really simple and regimented uh, practice,
Mm-hmm.
which was just a compass and a straight edge and like three colored pencils. And so I would just repeat this process every time of just starting with using the compass to draw circles and using the straight edge to connect lines and then using the colored pencils to sort of do really do whatever
Yeah.
happened, but a lot of times it was sort of seeing the patterns in the pencil marks, and
Yeah.
like highlighting certain areas with colors and whatnot like that. And so I just got into a really good rhythm and routine of um, doing that, understanding how to use those tools, which kept me engaged and also try things sort of like night after night. Um, and often I would, within even 10 minutes or 15 minutes of just focusing in on doing that little geometric expression, something would come up, just like the driving. It's like the creative, strange, like pieces that I was trying to put together with my sort of effortful awareness, like those would just come together and I could get sent off on a big tangent and I would often start in that time period of my life, I would often start writing or typing.
I see.
Um, and so, like the recordings, I have, I don't know, hundreds of pages of written and typed things that, again, I never ever looked at again.
Can you give me some example of what are the things that you thought or wrote or spoke about? Is there like a common pattern to those, or is it just everything and nothing?
I think it was mostly what I was focused on, those pieces that I was trying to
Yeah.
put together. I got very interested in sort of, all the tangential questions to what is consciousness, what is being, what is perception, what is meaning, even, like the meaning and values. Um, I just went on a journey of reading a ton of information, like you had mentioned earlier. Just like I had a just ravenous hunger to like read books
Yeah.
and follow the sources, and it started sort of centered around depth psychology and Jung. And so anyone who knows that there's a lot of branches to go off when you sort of like start with Jung and then go in a lot of different directions. So yeah, those were sort of the things that I would write about in terms of like sort of philosophizing about them or theorizing about them or trying to systemize them. But then also, I did sort of have a poetic urge sometimes. It was usually geared towards that topic or the sort of like personal experience of being or suffering or
Yeah.
hope, dread, and things like that. And so I was going through definitely a spiritual journey as well when I was sort of really steeped in that intellectual drive and taking action on a lot of that stuff
Yeah.
too. Like I said, the reading and the writing and spending lots of time and effort um,
Yeah.
with those ideas.
And so, I mean, I can ask you like, what are the things that you learn, and it's more of like a propositional thing. But how do you think it affected you to have outlets for your creativity? Like you felt like you were doing what you're supposed to be doing with that?
Hmm. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. Um, it's Well, from just like I guess my ego's perspective, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. Like
Mhm.
I think the word ego gets like a bad rap, and it deserves a bad rap in some ways, but also it's like it's who we are,
Yeah.
like
It's a
it's
part of it.
our self that's like going for what we want.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I was proud of myself for just like leaning into it and I enjoyed like you the feeling of realization and putting the pieces together. But at the same time, it was sort of after a long time, you start to realize that you putting the pieces together, at least for me, didn't always lead to that like more fulfilled feeling.
Yeah.
It didn't it didn't always bring me the meaning part of it. It didn't always bring me the satisfaction or the contentedness or the wisdom that I could actually use. I like would often sort of look back and be like, man, why was I even like wasting my time at like this like high level,
Yeah.
like so I wrote a bunch of stuff down and here I am. Um, I'm smarter, but I still have this ravenous hunger to like know more. I didn't come to any conclusion really,
Yeah.
um, on the deep questions.
But when did it like there must have been times when it did click, you know? Like there's you're mentioning times when like the meaning didn't add up. What are the times when it did? Like what are the characteristics of that?
Good question. Um, Yeah, it did click. It did click sometimes. And to me, the clicking was some sort of feeling of like validation of my own ideas. Now, might not be the click moment for everyone, but like I said, I feel like I was a pretty like ego-driven like person during this time. And so at the time, it was sort of about validating maybe the things that I thought other people had wrong or that I was a little bit confused about, or maybe I had like a negative bias towards. And I do have some of those like specific topics that I'm like really interested in sort of changing the perspective on
Yeah.
because I think the general perspective is either sort of wrong or misaligned or misaimed. Um, and I do see some like genuine issues at a societal level for some of these concepts that I feel like we don't have the right grip on, or like I
Yeah.
said, like not aiming in the right direction on some of these things. And so that was also driving me was a sort of, I don't know, competition, right? Like what is it in science? What do you call it in science when like you want to have the idea that everybody thinks is right?
Mm.
Like you
Yeah.
want to be the accepted idea, you want to prove your idea or something like that, right? So the moments that it clicked was like when it felt like validation that maybe some of my strange ideas were not so strange.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is
Not
that a
like idiosyncratic, like it was just to you, like it made sense to others as well.
I yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, the validation of just not in my, my crazy world.
Yeah.
That makes sense with my own language and interpretation of my own, symbols and uh yeah, that there was others who could, I don't know, maybe it's like a hope in others that could share like in the realization that I feel like I had.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like the positive side of it is like, hey, I want you to understand this too. Like it makes sense to me. It and it impacts my life. Like um
Yeah.
so maybe wanting to share. Like I said, I don't know if I give myself that much credit back at that time
Yeah. Yeah.
of
I
my
see.
life when I was trying to pursue a career in academia um and again, more just sort of ego driven of like wanting to prove myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not the worst thing to want to prove yourself in because in some ways you're progressing truth if you're doing it right and not out of the wrong reasons. But where I want to go with this is I've been thinking about strangeness, so beings as well. I'm interested in like different types of beings, whether there's an existence of some sorts. And I think ideas in that are quite interesting. Um, like I feel when you're describing your experiences with ideas that come up, that you open yourself up to them, and then in specific states of mind, they start to appear to you. Um, do you experience them having any autonomy of some sorts? Like how would you best describe in your words what that is like when an idea comes to you? Yeah.
That's very interesting. Well, I have recognized in myself certain patterns that I have in the way that I think, and so I don't if I were to characterize it, like I would say that um I'm very like left-brained.
Mhm.
And maybe it's those times where I have that inspiration where I actually like open up and sort of like have that right brain or like right hemisphere,
Yeah.
um, or right hand, whatever, if you want to think in terms of like right hand, left hand way and all of that sort of thing. And so I almost like am forgetting your original question now and why I took a little tangent on
Yeah.
why I'm left brained.
It's the autonomy, whether there's any autonomy
Oh,
to the ideas. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yes, thank you so much. So this I that now I know why I said that is because I feel like I probably have the tendency to not attribute autonomy to the way that I think. Um, even those inspirational thoughts. Um, but I'm a very sort of linguistic um person and thinker. And so
Yeah,
I think in terms of like words and sentences. And so if anything, my ideas, I really do think of them as like journeys or like trains of thought or
yeah,
like a path of a story. That's what these things feel like to me. And it's like somehow the story is extended or like I understand the story a little bit better. Um, but what I would maybe attribute some autonomy to is like maybe the deeper source or like of that inspiration so that because I think like the inspiration had to have come from something like autonomy, right? Like I don't think of the stories or the patterns of the ideas like coming out of nothing, right? Like and like I said, my ideas are generally language and sentences. That just doesn't pop out of there's like information pop out of the universe or something.
yeah,
The ideas and the stories and the patterns that I have came from probably some other thing that had stories and patterns and things to go off of in their life. And those types of impulses to me seem like something that developed through a line of autonomous things. And so I think of that sort of deeper archetype as autonomous, I guess, in a certain way, or has its own character. It has, um, but the problem is, it's like that's sort of a process, like through time. It's not really one moment or one person or one animal was this primordial archetype. But it is something that's living. It's such a weird, it's such a strange realm of possible autonomy. You know what I mean? What do you mean by like, why did you ask, like, do my ideas have autonomy? Do you feel like that happens to you?
um, well, the reason I asked the question is because a lot of people are so driven by, ideas and producing new ideas. And I really like it when you flip a situation, when you look at, scientists trying to figure something out, and it's like, no, actually the ideas. So this is just a story. I'm not saying this is actually how it works, but it's like, what if the ideas are the beings that use the scientists, to let them give birth to them in reality. So I've heard this a couple times before people express this idea, and I find it. See, I don't know if it's completely true, but it turns the situation around in a way where you start to think about it differently. So maybe there's an insight that pops up. So that's one of the reasons why I asked. And then in my own personal experience, um, I do think there is some autonomy to ideas simply because I think they're not fully subjective, nor are they fully objective. So I think because they're in this between type of space,
Mm.
I yeah, it's more out of ignorance that I say that they're probably autonomous because I think it's crazy to think that it ends with us. So that like we are the highest beings that can experience autonomy. Um,
Mm.
you've thought a lot about consciousness, for example. I think consciousness is so mysterious,
Mhm.
and
Indeed.
and yeah, like we are measurable in a sense, right? Like as human beings in terms of biology and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I have to be humble enough to acknowledge that I just can't know if there's other autonomies. And then I have personal experiences of beings that I do think are autonomous, but they're not exactly ideas. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. Those are, yeah, those are more than ideas.
Yeah.
Um, this makes me think about the sort of autonomy that we experience in dreams,
Mm.
um, or the different autonomous or the different beings in our dreams. And maybe are you referencing like a psychedelic experience?
The beings, yes, also dreams, both.
Okay, right. Yeah, different categories, but
Yeah,
not the normal beings like you and I don't
yeah,
think.
yeah,
Um, and so yeah, do you want to talk about dreams at all?
yeah. So I'll say about dreams to start with the beings, that I'm describing. I don't think all the characters in my dreams are beings. I know some of them are, well, they might be people from my life, um, that my psyche constructs in a way, my brain finds a way, I think, to let them, like, there's ideas that want to make themselves known to me in a sense. That's what I feel like. It's the best way for me to describe it. And then they embody themselves with people that I know that are familiar to me so that it doesn't come across as too strange for me. And then they try to tell me something. But then I've also had like distinct experiences of more autonomous beings where I was like, okay, this is not about me. This feels more like an objective. Well, I don't want to use that word. It's stupid. I want to get out of that that state of mind of objective subjective. But this feels beyond that. Like I've heard about this phenomenon before. I'm speaking with this one specifically about, and I mentioned this in my last episode, like an incuba, I think, like a sort of a feminine being that tries to make love to you of some sort. You have to like fight her off. That I've definitely experienced, and I was like, okay, I'm sure this is actually like happening in a sense. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know if you notice I raised my eyebrows and I uh
Yeah.
because that's partly what I was thinking of. Um was these right, not the dream world that we seem to create for ourselves, which is some of our dreams. Um, the other thing that I like to point out about dreams is that I think if we had like a really accurate poll, if somehow I don't think this poll exists, but I knew there is some supporting evidence of this that does exist. But I just believe my intuition is that if we had a global poll of all of your dreams, I bet we would find that a high percentage of people's dreams globally are negative,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. For
Are
me, yeah.
scary, they're sort of, you know, bad, strange things in a sort of in a bad way, maybe fear-based or anxiety-based or
Mhm.
things like that. So that's something to take into account, I think, when we think about dreams is like, hey, don't forget about like this fact that it might be tied to something really deep like our death,
Yeah.
and like and our fear of death.
Yeah.
Like don't forget that there's a whole realm of the dream world that is just fear death based. And that might just be the reality. So you have to be careful when you maybe try to interpret dreams or like work with dreams. Like, don't forget this might fit into this category over here that is like pretty common. Not to say that any dream that is like fear-based or death-based doesn't have more to like get out of it or that you shouldn't interpret those dreams. Like, definitely, I think those are dreams to maybe work with.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not making any suggestions here or prescriptions about interpreting dreams or not. So I'm
Yeah.
completely staying out of whether anyone should do this for themselves. Um, but yeah, there's the like fear-based dreams. I think there's also the like what I would say is like primal or primordial dreams, which maybe I'll just ask you, like, do you ever have the sense where your body is moving in a way that's not human, but it is animal? Like you're either having to like crawl or like gallop or
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that for sure.
okay. I think it's not like common, but I think at least that happened to me quite a bit in my life, and especially when I was younger, I think I always found myself like sort of running on all fours. Interestingly enough. Um sort of well, I guess I don't really know. In those dreams I never really saw my body, so I don't know if I was like a big wolf or if I was like
Yeah.
a tiny if I was like a tiny rat or something. It could have been either way. But either way, I was definitely scrambling around. I was
Yeah.
not walking up and down. And then there are these dreams that are, which you said, which to me, I would say maybe are like archetypal.
Yeah.
They
Exactly.
definitely have that extra sense of like there's something here that is like coming into my dream. Like you said, it's like it's not you. Usually you can look back at your dream and say, like, yeah, that was my crazy dream, like whatever, like that was my scary nightmare. But then there's like, whoa, this character seems to like have their own agency a little
Yeah.
bit more than the characters of my dream. Um, and I have had those dreams before. And one of them was this sort of lion tamer woman, you
Uh,
know, where the setting was like the gladiator arena with like lions on chains, and I was there amongst like other gladiators, like getting ready to like take on the lions, and then this figure came in from the side, and it was like just this like cloaked woman, and she just came up, and just the lions like they stopped. They were just like immediately tamed.
yeah.
Um, and I can just remember like the eye contact, honestly, in the dream. It was very short and brief. Like I just described it to you right there. That was basically it. Um, but it had a different sense about it. And that character specifically, like I felt like I just knew when I got up. I'm like, this was some different type of archetypal dream.
Yeah.
Um, and so I wonder if there's, again, sort of more. You said objectiveness. I almost want to go there
Yeah.
with like autonomy and objectiveness. Like if this happens for me and you and other people and across time, and um then there's something like autonomy consistently, remaining and existing and living on through dreams. I mean,
Yeah. Well, the reason I almost refrain from using the word is because so I think something can be true for multiple people. Like it makes sense. So in that sense, it's like beyond the subjective for sure. But would it still exist independent from us? Like would that realm still be there if we didn't have the consciousness? Like I think there's something very important about the embodied nature of like us and our consciousness. And then I do think there's also something like a collective consciousness or unconsciousness. And yeah, I've long thought about that question of does that need to rely on us? You know? That's why I'm a bit hesitant with the with the objectivity.
yep. And I mean, you're going down to the most fundamental level of questions we have. Well,
Yeah.
it's you're suggesting like ontology here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, truly, to me, you're wondering about, is there something beyond the material? Is there something beyond the physical that yet we still characterize as objective, like equally real as our material physical? Um, and so that really like pushes on the boundary of like, is there more than the physical and material? And if so, like, what is that category? And then you have to ask, like, okay, how do those things exist together? How are they the same? How are they different? Um, and yeah, I love think I've spent so much time thinking about those types of what's the best way to systemize that and explain that and use your knowledge of that,
Yeah.
right? So even if we are able to figure out what our dream archetype characters, this, what did you say? Incubus? Is
Yeah,
that
like a female
yeah,
version.
yeah. Incubus. Great band, by the way. You ever listen to Incubus?
What is the genre?
Oh, you've never listened to
No,
Incubus?
no.
Oh man, you have to listen to Incubus sometime. They're a band, they still play today, but they sort of were in their um height in the probably late 90s, early
Okay.
2000.
Okay.
Um or mid 2000s. They're a great band. They're sort of pop rock, I guess. They're not really
Okay.
pop. It depends on what album you listen to. Anyways, go listen to some
I'll give them a
Incubus.
listen.
Yeah, listen to, I mean, the standard album is like Morning View. It's called Morning View.
Okay.
Um, but there are many others that are really, really great. And so yeah, go to them. But yeah, so like does the Incubus um have, even if we figure out how we should characterize that autonomy and how we should describe that autonomy, and we can assume like that we actually know it and we understand it. I can't imagine what that is right now, because
No.
obviously we don't know. We don't like have a good characterization of like what are the differences, how do they interact. Um, but ultimately, we're going to have to take that understanding again and like bring it back. And so we can sort of, I guess, hypothesize about like why why is it that these other autonomous beings exist at all? What
Yeah.
purpose do they serve for us? Or do they serve a purpose for us at all? Maybe we serve a purpose for
Yeah,
them.
exactly. That's
Uh,
question.
right? Like maybe we are sort of swept up in a larger power that's driving forward. Do you see what I'm saying
I
here?
see
Where
exactly what you're saying. I
the
mean,
incubus, somebody that can come in and, well, geez, it seems like she can just come right into my dream. How does
yeah,
that happen? She
yeah,
got powers that I don't know. I'm not going into anybody else's dreams. I
yeah.
can't get into my, well, I guess I just like am in my own dreams, but so that, maybe I'm just, this is just, I'm just
No, for
making.
sure. And I want to add something like people that made it this far, I mean, they probably have a reason, but people that think dreams are stupid, I'm like, you're dreaming all the time. Like it's so much of your life that you're in this realm and you may forget it all the time. But if you would try to remember and write down how much you remember, it's so much more than you think if you get a bit more systematic about it. So that's why I take it so seriously because I'm like, I'm here, I'm spending almost half my life in this realm. I'm currently sleeping a lot, so but yeah, it's I think it's important that I start to understand it a bit better because I like this frame of, you know, are these beings trying to use or work with us for something? And I think yes, probably. So I was saying I was watching Lord of the Rings, and I like this, seeing the power of the ring, for example, on the people. But I think goodness works that way as well. Like there is a degree to which goodness or good spirits want to work through you, I think. And so how do you become receptive toward that? And similar, how do you stave off bad ones? um, this conceptualization, to me, taking these things seriously, allows me to more effectively accomplish this. Whereas I think a lot of people, they think that they don't exist, and thus they don't take them as seriously. Like if it's just a feeling, or if you just sleep a bit more and you do a bit of exercise, it's going to be okay. It's like I don't think it works like that. So that's part of the reason why, just to add, why I think this whole conversation and thinking about these things is actually important. um like it may not be useful in the quantifiable sense of the word, but yeah, this is like half our lives, so or more, whole all of our lives.
Yes. Totally agree. And great advice. This is again another practice that literally you just have to do, or you decide not to do it, which
It's
is
still
have
there.
a dream journal, write down
Yeah.
your dream. And at the same time that I was um, reading two books in the morning and two books at night. Not like completing the book, but there were two
Yeah.
books that I would read and two books that I would read at night. And when I was also doing the geometric constructions, I was also and again I was writing, I was recording, I was um, you know, I was like a monk at that time. I
Nice.
was working on a farm and so it was a very interesting time period.
Yeah.
Um, and another thing that I included in my practices was just writing down the dreams when I would have them, or even writing down the ideas or those trains of thought or those stories like in the middle of the night. And that's nothing new. It's not a mystery. Like tons of people and authors and gurus have mentioned the power of this. So it is really truly just good advice and like reiterating that like, hey, this is something you can try if you want to tap into the strange a little bit more. And yeah, it, there's something to our dreams, and so what I think is usually if you go into something with like good intentions in terms of again figuring out some wisdom or getting some meaning out of like what's happening in your life, like going into the symbolism and the just the phenomenology or the experiences of your dreams and what's coming up and how you react to that, that can be really useful. It can
Yeah.
be really a nothing burger, or
Yeah.
it can be something that changes your patterns and habits, and that's all we're looking to do in our lives is figure out the best sets of patterns and habits that we can, feel fulfilled. And so, yeah, writing down your dreams and
Mhm.
it's fun to you're so much more likely to remember them and get something out of them when you do it. You don't
Yeah.
realize that until you actually start writing them down. You don't
Mhm.
realize how easy it is to forget and never be able to remember it again.
Yeah.
You when you don't write it down.
Yeah. 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 It's true. And
It's a
then,
big loss. It's a big loss when you don't
yeah.
write it down.
Yeah.
Truly.
Absolutely. I also think that, well, in my experience, my dreams often try to nudge me into the right direction, so to speak. So they try to, like in hindsight, that's really obvious for me in my past dreams. Whereas,
Really.
like, oh, I see so very clearly what the dream was trying to tell me. And but in the moment, that sometimes is a bit more difficult to decipher. But yeah, it goes to this point. I was speaking to Emily, the artist that I spoke about, and she'd done some active imagination, so Carl Jung's practice, which
Great.
was like a semi-dream state, and it kind of hopefully allows you to engage and interact with parts of yourself, maybe unconscious parts of yourself. I don't know if I'm describing it correctly. And I'll ask you about your experience with that if you have any. But yeah, she was saying like for a lot of people it doesn't work because they don't really have a problem, like they just want to see a movie or whatever. So I think that's a caveat to add about this as well. Like a lot of working with the unconscious, I think, is it has to be directed effort, let's say, because you can become a very passive participant otherwise.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes just because of practicality of your life. Um, right? It's like it is sort of a privilege to have the space or the right moment or the
Yeah,
right support to be able to spend time with some of these stranger issues or some of those uh, just drives to find wisdom. Um, they can be sort of shut out by daily life. Uh,
definitely.
and daily challenges or seasonal challenges. Um, yes, I do think it's important to say that if you're going to get something out of it, you have to take it seriously and you have to believe in it and you have to stay at it for a little while, just like anything else. Just like anything else, just like doing actual art, just like exercising, just like dancing, just
Yeah,
like an instrument. It's there's something about the accumulation of time and the repetition and variation that happens where you actually learn and change and evolve based on what you're taking in. And this is another source of information that you can tap into, but just like any source, you're gonna have to put in a little work to tap into it and to um, yeah, again, even just like accumulate enough to like make sense of something. It's like if you just look at three dreams, like that's not a good sample size. You're not going to have the higher picture because you're not taking enough into account.
very good point.
It's like when you're 8 years old, you don't understand how life works yet. And that's just because not you're dumb or anything. Like it's just you haven't experienced being a teenager and being an adult. And so there's just wisdom that happens through time. And that goes for all of the things that I listed, including sort of dream journaling and dream work, I guess people would call it dream work, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
just working with your dreams.
yeah.
Um, at the
It's a
same
good
time,
point.
just like anything else, it's not going to solve all your problems either. Just like exercise is not going to solve all your problems, you know, devoting yourself to your instrument is not going to solve all your problems. Um, but it can make a change. It can be positive and it can help. Uh, I'm sure there's danger to it as well. There's also, as I mentioned before, sometimes your dreams are hard to work with. Um, and maybe hard to work with by yourself. And that's a whole nother layer of complexity is like what's appropriate and what's really helpful for any given person diving into their dream world. Like it can be I would say it's a place that I'm very cautious and um respectful of
Yeah,
because it's definitely way beyond what I understand when I think about my own dreaming.
yeah,
Um, so and we can play tricks on ourselves too. I
yeah.
mean, anytime we interpret ourselves, including our own dreams, we really run the risk of uh misinterpretation.
No, absolutely.
But maybe that's part of the practice too, is being more honest and tapping into and unfolding like what your true self is. I think that can happen with dreams too. And even maybe those dark dreams is like, are you able to unfold and open it up enough to get to those deeper levels of like why you do the things that you do, or why you are the way that you are, or why you're having the problems that you're having, or why you're achieving or not achieving the things that you're striving for. Um, it's a complicated thing,
Yeah,
psychology and
yeah, no, absolutely.
uh, self-help is, yeah, who's got self-help figured out?
Mhm.
Nobody.
No, no, and to go a bit back to the strange as well, and relating this to what you're saying, you need a solid, like steady base to be able to deal with a lot of the chaos that comes into your life. And in many ways, I think the unconscious is very chaotic. And so if you're already not like standing on some solid ground, it will be very hard to experience and interpret, you know? So doing it with someone in that scenario might be helpful, but also just looking at things that you can make more solid before you enter into chaotic type realms. Like I have a lot of people that, they take psychedelics, for example, because they want to fix themselves. And I'm like, well, if you enter into some place that is, well, place, if you enter into a state that's so chaotic while you're already yourself completely misaligned, it's a bit of a gamble, you know?
Very
Um,
much.
yeah. So I think that's something to take into account with the strange.
Agreed. And it's why we're not looking out for the strange all the time,
Oh,
like there there's a reason we settle into our daily life.
yeah,
Uh, right. And the things that keep us, we've talked about the comfort thing, the things that sort of keep us comfortable, and that's fine. And that's probably all our bodies can handle, you know. So there is a danger. And maybe it's also something that we talked about last time, which is like any practice that you have to figure out the right frequency and intensity.
yeah,
And so there is that sort of, gosh, like the analogies are coming together. There's like that tuning of your practice, right? Where you're figuring out what's the appropriate amount of like how many workouts do I do per week or month or day. For some people, it's like, how extreme are you going? How intense are those workouts? The same thing with your dream work. It's, how much are you dedicating? How many nights are you doing it? Are you,
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
way too intense, way too frequently? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. So
you
there's a
know,
massive like individual variation to that, but similar to like a metric like openness, like that's so different in people I'm noticing. And I wonder, is like so for example, if you're not very open, does that mean that because I know open people that will never even think about this type of stuff, like they hear about dreams and they're like, yeah, what stupid, you know? Um, would they maybe benefit even more from engaging with these types of things? Or is it
hmm.
just that they're naturally made to not, you know?
Good question. I'm totally just giving my gut reaction. I don't
Yeah,
know what
I know,
I
of
found,
course.
but what I would say, how I would characterize those types of people, and I agree with you that there's probably a spectrum that we could put people on for like how open they are or how receptive they are to strangeness, even. Like we can categorize and, put any scale we want on
Yeah,
anything. And none are really more valid than others. Because that's the whole point of like creating the scale is like you abstract, you say, hey, here's this characteristic. We're saying receptiveness to strangeness, and people are going to fall somewhere on that, right? Um, I think maybe the people who are like most receptive to it. I want to. I'll tell you what I was gonna say, but when I say it out loud, I feel like already I want to like contradict it. What I was gonna say is, uh, people who are have a proclivity towards that maybe have a higher potential. They
Mm,
are like driven more easily by something that's like a higher potential. Um, and that's part of a scale and a spectrum too, right? Is that there is a high end. Like with somebody's vertical jump, there's not like an infinite scale of like how high humans can go, right? Like some people have a higher potential for vertical jump. Some people have a higher potential for receptiveness to strangeness or something like that,
yeah.
right? And so maybe those who easily are drawn to that or allow for that more frequently, they just have a higher potential. And maybe some of us, like, me, are sort of like more, uh, I want to say like clerical. I think so much in the language and the numbers that I feel like I don't open myself up to some of those non-computational
Yeah.
ways of thinking, sort of. Um, so yeah, I think there are differences.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I'll say also like, I'm at a stable spot, which I think is why the strange is pulling me so much. Because I mean, the strange is going to show up in your life regardless, like chaos, for example. Um, and it makes me think of the hero myth. Like, I think you should always analyze for yourself if you're on an adventure, and if you're not, you probably need one. Like I think life is in many ways supposed to be an adventure. So I think the strange is pulling you all the time. And usually, the hero says no first before they actually go on the journey. And it's like, okay, I'll give into it. And then it's genuinely like there's genuinely negative potential there. Like the hero almost dies all the time and stuff like that. So it's not something you should tread into lightly, but is it better than doing nothing? Yeah, I think absolutely. So
Yeah, I agree too. I agree too because, well, I think part of the hero's journey, at least my hero's journey, is that you go out to that chaos, you get close enough to it to understand it,
yeah,
and but you survive. You can't like get too close, or you
that's
fall
detailed.
in, or you get devoured, and so you have to come back and tell the tale, and that's ultimately like what pays off for the bigger picture that you exist in as the hero. The hero is also in the context of whatever the society that he's leaving or the family that he's leaving or the self that he's leaving behind, like or she, whatever.
Mhm.
um and so coming back with that information about the chaos out there, um and how to survive it
Yeah,
specifically is kind of part of the point.
yeah,
And then I guess from the hero's perspective is like the sacrifice to like go out on the hero's journey, or like the in the face of fear, like acting in the face of fear. um you are changed from that experience by whatever, integrating it or just becoming different because of it. And so yeah, the hero's journey also, the hero comes back
yeah.
with information, with a story, and as a new person.
Mhm.
uh so
So
I think it's totally worth it. But beware.
yeah,
The
yeah,
hero's journey is like made for heroes.
yeah, yeah,
you know, I don't know if I'm a hero or not
yeah.
sometimes. Um,
That's
so
that's like the personal aspect to it. The hero's journey. So it's about us. You can apply it to your own life. And then another thing that I'm wondering about with the strange that I think is relevant, partially why I'm attracted to talking about this today, is that I feel that it's coming and it is here at a larger scale right now than it was perhaps 30 years ago. We're talking about people's people's understanding of reality is changing a lot these days. People are either regaining some sort of religious view, either they've completely lost their view of the world, and there's a lot of cracks in our worldviews right now. And so, what fills those cracks, I'm not exactly sure, but a lot of it is strange. and chaotic. And I'm not saying that in a bad way necessarily, I'm talking about Egypt with these different parts of the history of Egypt. You have more unified parts and you have more decentralized, chaotic parts. And when they just wrote about this at the start, so let's say early 1900s, they immediately characterized that as bad, the times when things were
Mhm.
less unified. But there's obviously also good parts to that. And so you had things were more widespread in terms of like, you start with the pyramids, they're amazing constructions, but the only way that those are possible if you centralize is if you centralize all people's efforts for just one or two royalty members of the royal house, let's say, and then it disperses. So yeah, but collectively, I think we're entering into this in some sense more chaotic and strange time, which I think it's important to think about it and how to best deal with it. Um, have you seen this pop up, and how do you think it's wise on a larger scale to deal with it? It's strange.
Um, I I I think like a lot of people, and just like you said, it's just a sense that you have about things. For me, it's the sort of the pace of everything. Um, and the sort of confusion and the sort of saturation of everything. Um, that is the part that is becoming maybe just too much for us to handle. And I agree that it seems like now there's much more attention being paid to this potential fact. Like one thing that I keep in mind too is that it's actually not that crazy out there. It's actually not that bad. Like maybe, I don't know, like to me it seems like it is like really intense times that are weird and stuff that is unnecessarily like sort of negative and bad and um lots of just issues and conflict and things like that. Um is that actual or is that just perceived? Or is it both? And I think for sure there's a higher level of perception and awareness on this potential fact. And I think it is pretty weird, man. I think these times, I don't know how to look forward into the future very far.
Yes.
Feel like anything could happen. And I feel like there are a lot of things that could change drastically. Um, because they have really recently, and just change in general I feel like is happening like at a much quicker rate. Like I said, to me it's something about the pace and the rate of things that's happening, and that includes sort of like change and newness and this sort of like product of chaos that comes out of all of this, like just churning forward of society, of like going through all of these things. And yeah, there's a lot of things that are sort of on the table right now
Yeah.
as to like what could happen. Um, so it's something that I am focused on in my own life with my own family and my own children, like really trying to sort it out and make choices and make good decisions and um, set ourselves up with like a good future outlook.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so much of it seems like along with the strangeness, and I'm just saying that because that's what like we focused our conversation
Yeah.
around. It's like a lot of things do seem like really sort of like strange and manufactured and like trivial, and that's the sort of strange feeling that I get, which is like, why are we placing any attention and value on some of these things? Um, and that is like strange. I guess that's where I get this like strange feeling. It's like, whoa, what the heck? Like, why am I focused on this thing?
Yeah.
Like this is like, how did I get here? How did I get
Yeah.
wrapped up in all
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
I feel like all of a sudden I'm in a strange world compared to where I grew up, or compared to what I imagined like the future to be like. At the same time, like I said, like a large portion of my day I feel like is very daily and normal, and just like my family life and my job, and I interact with normal people. I interact with people that work in schools, and it's very personal and real and normal and good and positive, really. So in a certain sense, like in my own bubble, like things are generally good, but I still have this sense of like these factors that are strange and weird, and like I don't like them.
Mm.
um
Yeah. I, I will say about this that, there is a degree to which, like you're saying, you can create solid ground for yourself to deal with it at large. And one thing that I like that you said, where it's like, how did I find myself here? I think a lot of people have that nowadays, where oftentimes you very passively get entangled with, I don't know, focusing your attention on something you didn't even think you wanted to focus on. Maybe you don't even want to focus on it at all, but you just ended up doing that. So we're talking about algorithms, we're talking about, the technology that is ruling us in some ways, ideas that are ruling us in some ways. Maybe it's even feelings that are seemingly stronger than we are, and then we end up somewhere else. And I think this is why having a conception of the spiritual is going to become very important. It's like, oh, these things are very real, and if you don't like that word, it's about maybe mental things of how do you organize your mind so that you don't drift off very easily, so that you don't find yourself in places that you didn't want to go to. um, I mean, there's a massive massive crisis there, right? So in the face of the strange, we can learn from it, but we need solid ground. And I think that solid ground now more than ever is hard to create. And so it is a serious endeavor, like a serious adventure to create some level of, let's say, normalcy, for lack of a better word. And with normalcy, I don't mean normal in a depressing way of like, I'm living my normal, boring life. It's not, no, it's normal things that you can trust, things that are more regular. So let's say regular patterns of life, so that you and the people around you can build to a future no matter what strange things are happening, or what strange forces are ruling us, let's say.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, discernment is so powerful, right? And whatever that means for you in your life, that's why discernment, I think, is such a powerful concept. It's like, you have to practice, you have to develop your ability to discern what you should do. And so, yeah, nobody's got any answers there. But what I wanted to pick up on, one thing that you said was like, I almost think that it's useful to even be okay with the fact that some of these things aren't real in the same way, and just use them for what they are and how you experience them. The It's almost like what I was saying before. It's like the extra knowledge of knowing exactly what it is. Does that pay off or not? I don't know. It's probably more about just that direct relationship that you have with those types of experiences and how you come out of it. So maybe the deeper understanding adds to your ability to move on from some of those strange experiences, and whether they're real or not. I just want to say, it's like, so what if it's real or not? Like, take something away from it. It happened to you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, and I guess, how do we create that sort of anchor for our life in today's world? Um, I guess you just got to continually think about what fits in and what doesn't.
Mm.
Um, it seems like a difficult task, and it just, I guess, again, this, I'm just drawing off my own experiences in my life right now, which is just, it's so very daily. It's, you have to, if you want to incorporate these things into your life, and you want to figure out how to ground yourself in today's world, it's like that's going to happen every time you get up in the morning.
Yeah,
It doesn't, it, I don't know, the grounding yourself is an active endeavor, because, and maybe that's why it's so hard these days, is because everything around you seems like it's changing so much and so quickly. So the sort of how do you adapt is becoming less and less obvious, and but yet more and more sort of like pressing.
Mm,
Um, and dude, our society and our global society is just so huge.
yeah,
There's a sort of momentum and mass that we have going, which is a large force in our lives a lot of the time, right? And
mm,
so how do you maybe sometimes we are powerless to these like deeper forces. Some of them we're saying are societal, maybe some we're indicating are archetypal dream beings. Some of them are biological stories and patterns. Um, some of those are personal and uh, daily.
yeah,
And so I don't know, man. It's a
yeah,
journey, like you said. It's supposed to be a journey. I feel like it always is, um, and we sort of accept certain paths that open up to us, or stay on the path that we're on over and over and over again in our lives.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's good what you're saying. I think it's, of course, it sounds, it sounds in some way easier than it is, but it is true that it needs to become like a small scale thing and a step by step thing, like anything, I guess. But there is a question of how do you know that you're in the right spot? This discernment, like how do I know for myself that I am able to say, oh, this is good or this is bad, or I'm on a good thing. And that's what's difficult about today as well, is that there feels like there's no collective ground underneath our feet to tell us. So the idea of like, where do you go for wisdom nowadays, it's not obvious to answer that question. And it's brought back a lot of people to a religious ground because there is something to say about good or bad there. um but yeah, what if that's what if that's something that you can't accept, you know?
I think that's actually a good. I think what you're suggesting is a good strategy, and maybe like at this sort of time that we're at, maybe this is the strategy that would be useful. It is, I think, to sort of say like, hey, we've come so far. I just think of this sort of like branching out, right? Where, like I said, like things have become saturated. It's like we're building off of all of the ideas and experiences over time, and we're reaching this point where like we've made so many branches off of what was maybe more narrow, not in a negative sense, just in that same sense of development where it's like an 8-year old doesn't know what a 28-year-old does. It's like someone living in 2024, in a certain sense, knows more because they have a larger history to draw off of.
Yeah.
And maybe we're getting to that point where it's like going any further where it's like not paying off anymore, right? And it's starting to, maybe like we said in the last meeting, like things need to decay and die. And then I think it's also sort of like, okay, take what we know on all these branches and bring it back to some of the more ancient ideas, or the more primordial ideas, or the more fundamental characters and stories, and that includes religious stories and myth, and
Hmm.
people have been dreaming for a long time and
Yeah.
interpreting their dreams and things like that. And maybe that's a more primordial avenue of information to again reconsider. It's like if you're looking something for something to be strange, don't like take that next step of where we've already gotten to. It's like go back to whatever Plato or
Yeah.
Socrates and like see what's strange about Plato to you.
Yeah.
So there's always like finding strangeness in something that maybe you've already incorporated in a certain sense, but it's not clear anymore. It's like too deeply hidden from the high level that we've gotten to. Again, it's like I'm just imagining the edges of the branches, and there are certain things down in the trunk or the roots that like we need to return to, or
Mhm.
um
Yeah. So you were speaking before in this conversation about this ravenous hunger you had for ideas and understanding. and reading books. Is that the same for you right now? Are you still on that? No?
Um, Certainly not to the same extent, not
Mm,
to the same frequency and intensity, right?
mm,
Uh, I think I do sometimes, almost in a nostalgic way, find myself in that mode again. I think it's something I'm trying to incorporate into my life as a really as a hobby, or just as a very small minor practice, because I do think I benefit from having some outlet for that. It certainly is not able to be high on my priority list, or I
good.
can't not devote too much time and energy to it, which is a bit sad, um, because I had a lot of belief in myself and the journey uh, previously, and so there's that sort of, yeah, again, this sort of nostalgia and yearning for like, what if I went deeper, or um, but I think I'm looking to be more practical about it, you
Yeah.
know, and be more reasonable, and uh, spend more time on the ground and less time like going off into the strangeness. Whereas before it was like, I was journeying daily, and so yeah, that's what I would say personally. But I do have a sense still that maybe that's what drives me, again, sort of egotistically, is like I have something to offer. I like to explain. Maybe I'm able to explain something well that makes
Mhm.
an impact.
Yeah.
I do have that sort of like urge and sense of responsibility to like sometimes share what I have to say, or have a conversation that helps someone else.
Yeah.
um, you always are nice and sort of let me, go off. But like I like to help other people work through their ideas too, actually.
Hmm.
Um, and Yeah, and maybe some of my what you said before, like my unconventional thinking is like I like to help people with that tool.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I always offer to people that I know or that I work with, like, hey, like I love to brainstorm, like just like bring me in. Like you don't even have to, give me any context of like what's going on. Just ask me. And in my experience, like that does work well. When I was in grad school and stuff, I got involved with like a lot of different sort of research interest groups who, people are sometimes, just meeting regularly and discussing the problems and the research problems and how do we design. And I was a part of so many different conversations, and people were just they were just asking me, allowing me to be there.
That's
Right.
amazing.
And so I did sort of just like jump in and try to add something to the conversation. And it wasn't always like me driving it. It wasn't always, my ideas. I was trying to just, again, like, hey, use me as a tool to think. But yeah, I don't have those conversations as frequently anymore, right? So it's and that's totally fine. That's where I'm at in life. Like so many of my conversations are like, come on over here. We gotta eat this food. Like, come on, we gotta get your clothes on. Come on, we gotta
Yeah.
do this. Like, whoa, stop doing that, or like, let's play this game. So many more of my hours and efforts and conversations are doing that. Uh, or the conversations that I have at work, which are sort of in a very small category of topics. And
Yeah.
um, I'm not talking about the philosophy of neuroscience at work. Um, I'm not having many conversations about information theory
Yeah.
anymore. But at one time I was doing that. So um, what's appropriate for me now? That's a question that I ask myself, and I struggle to find the right balance. I do. So
Yeah, I really understand that. I think it's definitely good to realize that, well, I don't know if it's intellectual, the side of you that you're describing, but I don't know, this yearning from you that I would hope that it can get uh scratched, like this itch can get scratched also in this embodied way, like with the things that you're doing in everyday life, to realize that pretty much every action you take is imbued with this with the same spirit, or at least it can be, like seeing the magic in in all the little things, um, but still acknowledging that part of yourself that is like very brainy and intellectual and giving it some energy. But I think your qualities are uniquely suited to uh, bringing wonderful people into this world. You have I think, an awesome way of seeing the world, and the fact that I know that you're hopefully giving some of that to some of the next generation is all very hopeful. So it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, man. I try, yeah, I try. I try. I'm not perfect. I'm maybe not even great at doing it, but I do give a good effort. And I think you're right. And anyone who relates to any of the stuff that we've been talking about, and there are things in your life, that I'm sure you're sort of looking to incorporate so that you are healthy. And I think that those spiritual things do end up in physical health as well, right? And so, and it's a complex system. It's a feedback loop of feeling healthy and having that outlet or that expression or that practice, and the practice itself and the expression itself leading to physical health and things like that. So it is really important for anyone to be aware of what sort of like expressive practices you should incorporate into your own life and how to appropriately fit those in, because it's a piece of the puzzle and it should help out. And if it doesn't, you'll learn that through trying it anyways. So you have to go through the trying it out. Um, you can't have the sort of analysis or paralysis by analysis where it's like, all right, let me just figure out all of the perfect things that I should do in my life, and then I'll do them all, and then you end up doing nothing. Um, right? So it's just
Yeah.
like, well, you might as well start with the first thing that you think of, or the easiest thing, um, or the one that you believe in the most, maybe, uh, and just give it a go at least one time.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah,
Awesome.
man, what can I say that like you inviting me to have these conversations and doing it more than once and inviting me back to just talk with you, like thank you. That's part of like the expression. Like, dude, you have those conversations with me. I said like I don't have those conversations anymore. It's like you're doing that. So, yeah, thanks for letting me talk.
Well, thank you.
And um yeah, as I said, that means often my health.
Yeah.
Just let me come and talk to you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And it's enriching my life. And I would say, like, for the next one, to let's just uh think about it while we're out and about doing our embodied lives, and if something pops up that you feel needs to be given attention, and I'll do the same, where I'm like, okay, this is one that I need to discuss with them. Uh, let's reconvene. I think that's a good
all
idea.
right. All right, cool. I might, yeah, maybe some of our time can be in those strange ideas
Yeah.
too. And we can again make a practice of spending some time with strange ideas, like we didn't even get into any of those specific topics like remembering or
Yeah.
misremembering. So
Yeah.
those are things that I think are often like in that range of strange ideas that could make an impact. So
Yeah,
maybe
we
we
can do
talk.
that. I know, because I remember you spoke in the first episode that I listened from you, partially about memory and memory. And I actually spoke about this yesterday. I was like, there's something really mysterious about that, where it can feel right there and it can feel really far. And the connection between that, I wanted to explore. So I know you're a busy, man. You email me whenever and we'll set something up very soon.
And then I wanted to shout out this book. This inspire it on your screen. Is it reversed or can you actually
No,
see
no,
it?
I can see it proper.
Okay. So this is probably one of the in my life probably one of the most important books that I came across. Um, so it's a book edited by Joseph Campbell. So it's a collection of different essays about myths, dreams, and religion. There are people like Uh, the one that I read for today was Owen Barfield. There's
Oh,
Alan
yeah.
Watt. There's Joseph Campbell, Rollo May. So these are people who have some really interesting things to say about some of these strange ways of consciousness. So if you want to take a look at this book, if you ever, order
Yeah.
used books online or line or something, I'm sure it's probably, less than $10. So maybe you want to look into some of
Yeah,
that for
I will.
information.
I'll read it
Cool.
before the next one.
Haha.
Okay.
All right. There you go. Reading four books
Yeah.
at a time, right? That's what are you on that level yet, Lucas? Come on.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
All
Thank you so much for today, Scott. I hope
right,
you have a
man.
good
Dude,
weekend, and
it's
we'll
so
speak to
fun.
you
It's
next
great
time. Absolutely. See you,
great
man.
to, yeah, goodbye.
Have a good one.